Hey there, Roundtable. This is our March 2019 update, March the 26th. A little bit later in the month. I normally do these earlier in the month, but that's because I wanted to do this after the UTC lecture, annual UTC lecture. So it was just a few days ago, and glad to see you. You might notice a little, you've probably seen something like this in my previous videos. Does that look like Robin Hood? It is Robin Hood. It's the county flag of Nottinghamshire over in England. My great grandfather on my mother's side was from Nottingham, and when they decided to do a county flag for Nottingham, they had this beautiful design, the forest green with the St. George's cross with the white outline. We call it fimbration. Somebody said we've got to have Robin Hood in there, and so they went and put that shield and a silhouette of Robin Hood in the middle of it. Okay. It's still a decent flag. I liked it without the Robin Hood, but anyway, enough of that. And if you hear any music in the background, it's from a program on the life of C.S. Lewis called The Magic Never Ends. And if you've never seen that program before, you ought to check it out. It's really nice. Okay, so news and things that we're going to share with you today. First of all, Netflix Narnia update. The only new thing is that a few weeks ago, Douglas Gresham, when he was in Taylor, South Carolina, to see The Horse and His Boy play, which looks absolutely amazing. I've got a friend who lives near there. He's gone to see it. We really need to get over and see this play. At any rate, he commented on the fact that if Netflix does have a TV serial, which has been mentioned, that it would be a good way to get the whole book onto the screen instead of just a book edited on the screen. Sure, yeah, we would all love to see that, but at least Douglas is thinking along those lines. We'll just keep waiting for more news to come up. Sorry, I don't have anything else, but it's not my fault. It's not my fault. Okay, now let's see what else we got going here. Oh yes, now for those of you all who are interested in the Saturday morning retreat on the grounds in that little chapel there that's just in Catoosa County, just a few minutes down the road. I'm waiting to hear back from the Greers. This chapel was built by Bubba and Peggy Greer, who are people that go to our church, and he's a retired physician, and they live off of Burning Bush Road. I'm thinking of the first Saturday in May. Okay, first Saturday in May, we would meet together there, have morning prayer in the chapel, study something that we would want to study about C.S. Lewis, and then have lunch together. And it should be fun, and I would hope an edifying time. I hope that more of you all can come. There's just been 2 or 3 of you all have said you can come. I'd like to see more of you all there, just because I'm trying to do something for you. Just trying to add more to the fun of what we're doing here with C.S. Lewis in Chattanooga, and your support on Patreon. So do let me know if maybe you've missed this announcement or something like that. It is on the post on the Patreon homepage, my Patreon homepage, and more details there. So let me know, but like I say, I'm waiting to get a final word back from the Greers if that first Saturday in May will work for them. They said anything after the middle of April will work, so I'm assuming it will. So again, I'll be updating you all, sending you messages from Patreon, and posting things on Patreon about the retreat. And this is for all of our patrons, not just the round table. Remember, it's round table. Okay. Let's see, what else do I have on here to talk about? Okay, now one thing that I need to start marking these things out so I can get them off the list. Not this weekend, but the following weekend, there's going to be a retreat hosted by the Inklings Fellowship at Montreat, North Carolina. And I'm going to be providing a link for this here with this video. But Sheila and I are going to go to the retreat for you. Okay, we found a nice inexpensive Airbnb in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Montreat's just a few minutes up the road from there. Speaking at the retreat is going to be Harry Poe, who is the organizer of England's Fellowship. He's a professor out in Memphis. And also Don King, which is why I suspect it's one of the reasons why it's at Montreat, because he's a professor at Montreat College. And Don King, you may not know, he's the go-to guy for Lewis poetry. He's written several books on Lewis's poetry. He's also written books on his wife, Joy Gresham. And so that's sort of has been his focus. But he's coming out with a new book on Lewis's brother, Warnie. I think it's a biography on Warnie. And that's really interesting. And so he's going to be speaking apparently about Warnie at the retreat. It's a bite-sized, achievable retreat for us to go to based upon our Patreon income. And so the plan is that we're going to go to this retreat so that I can come back and report to you what happened. It's a project that we're doing for you. And so that will be, I will be reporting on the retreat in the April update next month. So I wanted you to know that I'm doing that, and so you can look forward to hearing about the retreat and what is said there about Warnie and whatever else they may be talking about, because the final agenda, I don't even know if it's completely set yet. But anyway, I'll send you a link. Maybe you would like to come too. It's $75 for the weekend. It's Friday evening, all day Saturday, and the Sunday morning. We're going to come back on Sunday morning, so we're not staying for that part. But anyway, I'll give you that link. Okay. Now, also another interesting event that's going on tomorrow night, Wednesday night. It's in Houston, Texas. It's at Houston Baptist University. Sadly, I can't go. It's a free event. I suppose if I could, fly down there, I could go to it. Actually, I have gotten a ticket for it, free ticket. Why would you do that? Well, because I'm trying to stay in touch about this thing, because I'm hoping maybe they'll stream something or record something, whatever. But as you know, or maybe you don't know, but at Houston Baptist University, there is a literary apologetics curriculum, a degree that you can get. It's headed up by Holly Ordway, who's a friend of mine. She's a professor there, an English professor, a convert to Christianity via C.S. Lewis, and and so it's a degree that focuses on it's sort of like how good literature, classic literature, imaginative literature can be used by God to help people to come to the knowledge of God, as we see in the life of Lewis, and so it's an attempt to foster the idea of good literature that is not patently Christian, but it communicates via the imagination the Christian view of the world, and even how to know how God seeks to relate to us, like the Chronicles of Narnia do. Anyway, so that's going on, and Michael Ward is he's part of the program, and he comes over to the States every year for about 3 weeks or so to teach, and then he continues to teach online in connection with Houston Baptist University. And so this conference tomorrow evening is going to be with Michael and Holly and one or two other people, and the title is What is the Current State of C.S. Lewis Studies, which is just the kind of thing I love. Anyway, I can't get there, but I am hoping that I'm going to hear somewhere or another about what is said, and if there's anything that I can learn from that, and I'm going to be working on it. I'm going to be, hey Holly, hey Michael, whoever's in charge of this event, whatever I might be able to learn, I'll pass it on to you next month. I can't guarantee it, but we shall see. At least I'm working on that. Now, what else is going on? Okay, in April, and I think it's what is it? Friday or Saturday, Saturday, April the 26th, maybe. It's the 26th or 27th, but that's Saturday on that weekend. Max McLean is going to be back in town at the Tivoli, and instead of doing the Screw Tape a play. He's doing a play that is about Lewis's conversion, and he's going to be in the persona of C.S. Lewis. It's going to be very good. It's a little bit pricey. I will provide links to this, of course. However, I have arranged with the people that are producing this play to be able to get group discount tickets. You can only get group discount tickets using sitting either in Tier 1 or Tier 2. If you go to the link that I'll give you for the tickets, you can see which part of the Tivoli seating is Tier 1 or Tier 2. But there's two options to this. One of these is that if we can get a group of 10, and Sheila and I would be included, then we could sit in Tier 1 for $55. Or we could sit in Tier 2 for $45. I think the cheapest ticket is 40 something anyway, but at any rate, you can see what Tier 1 Tier 2 are. So if we can get 8 more people besides Sheila and me, we would have a group of 10, and then that way those who are part of the group can get tickets at $55. It's going to be more than that without this. Or if we get a group together of anywhere, say between 5 or 6 or up, to however many it would be, that would be $45 each. Now, if that doesn't work out, and here's the thing, you can even do this yourself. If you go to the link, you'll see that if you've got a group of 4 or more, they give you a code to use where you buy the tickets, and your Tier 1 or Tier 2 tickets would be $50 each. So that would be like if you wanted to set up your own little group of, like say, you and your spouse, and then maybe another couple that are friends of yours, or maybe your friends that that aren't necessarily another couple. Whatever kind of mix you've got, 4 or above, you can use this 4-pack. It's actually what it is it's a discount if you have under 10. So if you have under 10 and if you want to do your own group, use that 4-pack, and it'll be $50 per ticket for either Tiers 1 or 2. So I've tried to find out from them for you what can be done to see if you want to go, if there's some way of getting some discounted tickets. So that's the arrangement. So if you want to have your own little group of 4 or more, then you can go to the website, use the 4-pack code, and you all will get your tickets for $50. If we want to pool things together and try to have as many as 10, in other words just 8 more besides Sheila and me, then they would either be for Tier 1 $55, Tier 2 $45. But in that case, you would have to let me know so that I can keep a tally of who's going, and if we've got enough, then what you would do is you would send me the money, and then I would buy all the tickets on my credit card, and then we would pick up our tickets at the box office there at the Tivoli, and we would all have a section together where we would be sitting. So that's if you're interested in going to see this play in April, I've tried to get this together for you. So just let me know what you'd like for me to do. Now let's see here. Now, I have also met with Ian Goodman, who owns Goodman Coffee in Warehouse Row, talking to him about the possibility of using the coffee house there for a monthly meeting. It's a nice little shop that has its own independent entrance door or exit door, depends on whether you're coming in or leaving, on the sidewalk on the street at Market Street. But you, of course, can come in through Warehouse Row. But on that far end of the shop, you can easily get two dozen people sitting there. And they normally close at 7. So the idea is that they're going to keep the shop open an extra hour from 7 to 8. And so we would have it to ourselves. And we can, have them turn the music off or whatever. And so we could meet at Goodman's, coming in, a little on the earlier side, especially if you want an espresso drink. To get something to drink. We might need, in fact, we probably will need to have an entry fee of, say, $2 because just to let you know the details, they need to have at least $30 coming in the shop that night to pay for the guy that's going to be there keeping the shop open. I think we can do better than that, but to try to guarantee that money is there and give them a little bit more because we want them to be happy that we're there. I'm thinking about everybody that walks in the door contributes $2 to being there, to come up with a pool of money that plus the amount of coffee that is purchased, we'll be able to give them somewhere between $30 and $50 for being there, and that way everybody's happy. And if we like the venue, and if it works out for us, and remember that the parking meters downtown are free after 6 o'clock. So if you can't get into the free spots there at Warehouse Road, there's all the metered spots. There's plenty of parking for after 6, and also recognizing that the whole place is supposed to, shops are supposed to start closing down after 7 or so. So you ought to be able to get in there all right. I've just got to come up with a date. And so I'm working on that to try to come up with a date for our next monthly meeting, and then we'll have it there at Goodman's in Warehouse Road, and we'll see if we like it there. All right, now marking that off my list. I'm starting to run out of things to talk about, but the next thing I want to talk about has to do with the UTC C.S. Lewis lecture, so let's just jump into that right now. Some of you were at the lecture, others of you were not. Maybe about, there's what, 7 or 8 of us right now in the round table. So about half of you all were there. And a big thanks to Charlie for helping me with the books. It was a mess, wasn't it? They've got the Vine Street all the way from Douglas to it's a dead end part of Vine, but it dead ends right there at Durthick Hall, but it's all dug up, and there was all this chain link fence, and you couldn't get it. It was a mess, and I had to cart books all over the place, and Charlie helped me, and so I really appreciated that, Charlie. But as you know, the lecture was about Lewis's trilemma argument from Mere Christianity, a liar, lunatic, or Lord, regards to what do we do with Jesus Christ. And the lecturer was Don Williams, who is the author of a number of books, but the book Deeper Magic is a survey from a Reformed evangelical viewpoint of Lewis's theology, looking at all of his writings and categorizing it like a systematic theology would be done. It's a great book. But he has a whole chapter in there on this, and so the contents of the lecture are pretty much what you'd find in that chapter. So if you want, you can get a copy of Deeper Magic, read the chapter, and you would to get the basic points. What I want to do is I want to go over the basic gist of what the lecture was about, but I'm going to be doing it in a different way, and I'm going to be providing some supplemental literature for you so that even if you were there, I hope that this is going to be interesting. But this way, we're all on the same page. We understand what the lecture was about and the issues and what the answers were. And so here's the thing. In fact, let me just read this last paragraph here from Mere Christianity, because it's just so good. And as Williams was pointing out, what Lewis is doing, you remember Mere Christianity is a print version with some editing of the BBC wartime talks that Lewis gave. He was speaking to the general British public, trying to help them to understand, first of all, that they were sinners, and then secondly, that Christ was the answer, but in a way that wasn't pointing to the Bible, but was just starting from common sense and human experience and so forth. And then he gets to the Bible, because that's where we find the stories of Jesus and Jesus' claims. And as Williams pointed out, the general British public, if they didn't think Jesus was who he said he was, they would at least have thought, yeah, sure, he was a great moral teacher. Okay, at least the things he taught were good. And so that's what Lewis is trying to address. So he says, I'm trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. So see, he's directing this to the general public. Quote, I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God, unquote. And he says that is one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would be either a lunatic on a level with a man who says he's a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell, because he's lying, and the devil is the father of lies. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. So, and that's called the trilemma argument. Now, what's happened is that people have said that the trilemma argument is dated. This was in the 1940s. The book comes out in the 1950s. And it just isn't sophisticated enough for us postmoderns. Why is that? Well, because of the fact that today there are, people have different concerns. And they're primarily two. The first one, and this comes from all the deconstruction and reconstruction of New Testament studies and so forth, is a claim that, well, Jesus didn't actually say those things. Now, Lewis is assuming that everyone he's talking to believes that the Gospels are historic and Jesus of Nazareth actually did say, I'm God, one way or another. And yet we have people who subsequent to that would say, well, the New Testament wasn't really put together the way it's traditionally conceived. It was actually something that was put together as the centuries went by, and people by 300 AD, they thought there were people that thought he was God, and so they wanted the accounts to say he was God, but he didn't really say that. These are words people are putting into his mouth from centuries later and claiming that this is what he said. And they think that because they look at the New Testament and they look how it's put together literarily, and they also have certain other assumptions. For example, there were no miracles, and that this changing document or these changing accounts took place. They have to make a lot of assumptions. And so the point of the matter is, Lewis's argument doesn't work anymore because we know Jesus didn't really say that, because the New Testament is later than he thought it was. And then the other objection, and this is a little bit different, and that is that what we have in the New Testament is a collection of legends that grew up from the grassroots, as it were. People began to believe stories about Jesus, and they took on a common purchase, and so these legends grew up. And so, again, Jesus didn't say those things because they're legends that grew up. He didn't actually say that. People attributed those things to him later. So you've got basically two things going on here. Either this is legend or there's something wrong with the text. And a good illustration, which was, and his name was just mentioned at the lecture, I believe, of this sort of complaint is what we have in Alistair McGrath's biography of C.S. Lewis that came out just a couple of years ago. And here's where I'm trying to give you stuff that wasn't at the lecture, but just listen to this. This is Alistair McGrath speaking, and he addresses the trilemma, and he says, it's a weak argument. Lewis offered a considerably longer discussion of this point in the original broadcast talks, and this is interesting, which he pruned down drastically as he revised it for publication. The original form included discussion of other options. Now that's interesting, and was much less trenchant than the abbreviated discussion in Mere Christianity. I'm not sure how to find out, what those things were. It's something to look into. Many Christian theologians might argue that Jesus here failed to account for the concerns of more recent New Testament critical scholarship, and that his simplified argument could easily backfire under the light of a more critical reading of the Gospels. Yet the main problem is that this argument does not work apologetically. So you see, McGrath is taking the stand, I don't think this is a good argument for today. And there's other people that are doing that. He goes on. It may well make sense to some Christian readers who already know why they have come to this conclusion and are glad to have Lewis reinforce their position. Yet the inner logic of this argument clearly presupposes a Christian framework of reasoning. Now, I would argue against that. For example, I don't think you necessarily have to be a Christian. And of course, I mean, obviously Jews would agree with me here. But I'm just thinking in terms of anyone who has a pretty decent idea, we would say, as Christians or Jews, of just who God is as the basis of all being and the creator of everything and the sustainer of everything, that if a person said, I am God, you wouldn't have to be a Christian or a Jew if you had that understanding of God, to think this guy's nuts. Okay? So I disagree with McGrath here, but let's continue. He says, it would not necessarily make sense to Lewis's intended audience of non-believers who might, to give one obvious example, suggest the alternative possibility that Jesus was a well-loved religious leader and martyr whose followers later came to see him as divine. You see, now that's this idea of an understanding of Jesus developed doctrinally over the centuries. The option that Jesus was someone who was not mad or bad, but was nevertheless wrong about his identity, needs to be considered as a serious alternative. Now, this is something that Williams brought out, and it's an idea that some people have also tried to use, and that is that the problem here. Let's assume that the record is true. That Jesus really, instead of saying no, the record isn't true, it was either changed and added to later, or it was something. It was just legends. So let's just assume, though. Let's take a different tack that the words of Jesus are true. He really did say these things, but he was wrong about himself. And as Williams brought out, the idea here is that Jesus wasn't bad. He wasn't the devil. He wasn't lying. He wasn't completely insane. I mean, he could say some good moral things that are helpful for people, which and could be taken reliably as because they're obviously good, and so it's not like he's completely crazy. But he did get it wrong about his self-identity, and that is something of an aberration. He wasn't totally sane at that point. And what Williams argues, and I think Williams is absolutely right, you've got to think about the claim. Jesus isn't saying, well, let's think of somebody who's mistaken about themselves. Let's say if I was mistaken about myself and I thought that I was someone who could play NFL football and be successful at it. You talk about something absurd. But if I really believed that, you would say, well, yeah, he's got a little bit of a problem with his identity there. But Jesus is not claiming even something like that. He's saying, I am God. And you have to think about the quality of such a statement. It is impossible for someone to not be crazy and really believe that about themselves. It would mar everything about them. So at any rate, it's like I can't really believe McGrath is saying this. But anyway, Lewis, and here's where I'll end. Lewis, normally so good at anticipating objections and meeting them carefully, seems to have misjudged his audience at this point. The whole section cries out for expansion and more careful qualification. Now, what Williams did is he acknowledged this. He said, look, the trilemma argument we have in Mere Christianity, which went out on the radio waves, was for a particular audience. It was for the general British people. And they were not up on all the latest theories about what's wrong about the New Testament. They weren't up on what constitutes legends in literature. They weren't up on these nuances, these finer things that other people are subsequently, like McGrath, bringing up. So you can't fault the trilemma on that level. Plus, if you are talking to anybody else today, who is in this, you could say, in the same shoes as the general British public was in those days, then the argument is valid. But Williams went on to say that, yes, but, perhaps, not perhaps, it is legitimate to ask that this argument have, what was the word? It starts with an S. That it be supplemented. Okay? That it's legitimate to recognize that the trilemma argument could use supplementing. And it was kind of brief during the lecture, but it was a really terrific point that Williams brings out. And that is that Lewis does supplement his argument. He does talk about arguments against the historicity of the New Testament text. He does talk about the idea that the stories we have in the New Testament are legend. He is not, as McGrath is saying here in his book, failing to anticipate objections to the trilemma or that anybody might bring up these issues. He doesn't fail to do that. He's not doing it in mere Christianity, but he has done it elsewhere. For example, in God in the Dock, in the chapter entitled, What Are We to Make of Jesus Christ? In this chapter of God in the Dock, What Are We to Make of Jesus Christ? This essay is about the trilemma. He says, in here, it looks like Jesus is either a bad person or he's insane. What are we going to do with this? And in the process of this, listen to this. He says another point is that on that view, you would have to regard the accounts of the man as being legends. Now, as a literary historian, I am perfectly convinced that whatever else the Gospels are, they are not legends. I have read a great deal of legend, and I'm quite clear that they are not the same sort of thing. They're not artistic enough to be legends. You see what Lewis is doing here? Now, first of all, Lewis is speaking as a world-class, indeed one of the greatest of his century, as a world-class literary expert. And he is saying, I know legends when I see legends. And he recognizes that some people would say that Jesus' words that we have in the New Testament are just legends that were handed down and written down. And he says they can't be. They don't have the right literary feel as legends. And so here is Lewis anticipating an objection that now, these are just legends. Is Lewis failing to recognize objections to the trilemma argument? He's dealing with the legends one right here while he's talking about the trilemma argument. Ta-da! Okay, now let's look at the other one. And that is in Christian Reflections, where in one of the latter chapters, it's called Modern Theology and Biblical Criticism. C.S. Lewis addresses at length some modern views of how the New Testament text should be handled and understood to have developed. And he talks about how I'm just a layman about these things. You see, here's the thing. When it came to the legends thing, he speaks as an authority. When it comes to this New Testament textual criticism stuff, he backs off and he says, I'm a layman here. But he says, I do know enough. I am educated enough that I, as a mere sheep, may have certain bleats in contrary to some of these theories. And bleat number 4, he says, which is also my loudest and longest, is still to come. He says on page 159 of my edition, what forearms me against all these reconstructions of the New Testament text is the fact that I have seen it all from the other end of the stick. I have watched reviewers reconstructing the Genesis of my own books in just this way. You see, what happens is that people look at the New Testament and they make subjective assessments of it, saying, well, this part right here couldn't have been written in the 1st century. This part over here must have been written in the 3rd century. And they're taking it apart and deciding what was, original, what wasn't original, and all these other sorts of things. And Lewis is saying, that whole way of proceeding, that whole method of operation, I've got serious questions about it, because I've seen people do the same kind of thing with what I've written, and I've seen how stupid and foolish it can make people seem. So, and this is, here is Lewis addressing apologetically one of the very objections to the trilemma that comes up in another context. So at any rate, it was, I really liked how Williams brought up these points. It says, look at what Lewis has done elsewhere. I'm sorry, McGrath. Lewis is not in the trilemma, in Mere Christianity, he's not failing to anticipate objections. He doesn't anticipate having these particular objections from this particular audience. If he had, he would have done what he did elsewhere when he did anticipate those objections from those audiences. Okay, well, enough of that. Now, was I going to say anything else about that? No, I don't think so. So the upshot is the trilemma is still a good argument, but just as when Lewis used it, so even today, you have to recognize who are you using it with. And if you're using it with somebody who has pretty much the same idea of who God is that we have, then they will understand, using common sense, that to say I am this God is either you're just putting me on, or you're nuts. And then if anybody wants to get into some of these other things, then we can talk about those things as well. Of course, the trilemma is not the only argument that there is to talk to people about Jesus Christ and try to help them to understand the truth of Christianity. And really, and some of us ministers yesterday were in a meeting, we're talking about this. Really, the strongest testimony is your own life. I mean, when you can show people, look, I once was lost, now I'm found. I used to be like this, but Jesus came into my life, and now I'm like this. And it's something that they cannot deny. You cannot deny this amazing change in your life, and they can't deny it either. I mean, if they've watched you go through this or whatever, it's another argument, and it's actually an argument that would really affect people. You watch these stories from. Who is it again? I forget. But just these, I've posted some of these on my Facebook, and I can send you a link for this because I'm forgetting the website right now. But all these video testimonies of Jewish people come into faith in their Messiah. You listen to these stories, and you see these, and you just know these people aren't lying. These things have really happened. They've even suffered persecution because of what they are going through. You can't deny this. So, my dear patron friends, always remember, whatever else you might think that you could or would say to anybody, your own testimony of who Jesus is in your life is important. Don't short sell it. Don't think I don't have anything to say. You can always tell people what Jesus means to you. And if they want to look into it further, they can. All right, so let's see. Is there anything else I had on my list to talk to you about here in March 2019? No, I think that's it. One other thing that you might want to consider doing, there's one other thing I do want to talk to you about, and that is I've mentioned expanding what I'm doing C.S. Lewis-wise in town. I've got another meeting coming up in a couple weeks to meet with one person who is a C.S. Lewis scholar here in town, and another person who's also got a PhD and interested in these things. I'm still exploring that. It's just a lot of parts. It's not anything to be rushing into. So I appreciate prayer that as I'm trying to talk with people, that what I really need is for God to put together a team of people who want to see more Lewis stuff done, and probably see a Christian study center associated with UTC that's an integral part of this. it's going to take a team of people, not a lot of people, 3 or 4 people or something, but there's going to need to be a board formed and those kind of things. So please be praying that if this is something God wants, that it will start to take shape, and that I'll recognize that it's taking shape, so that I can gladly give myself to it, and we can see what happens. Okay? All right. And also, always feel free to tell somebody if these videos, these updates, and other things that I send your way, or like the retreat coming up, or things that I'm trying to do, if you think that these things are valuable, and maybe you'd like to share this with somebody else, that perhaps they'll become a patron as well. It'd be kind of nice if we all were able to get somebody else to join in with us. It would be a big encouragement to me, of course. So, all right, I think that's it for now. My goodness, this one has been about twice as long as the ones I normally do. They're usually 20-something. This is 40-something. So God bless you all. We'll be in touch soon. And so y'all take care, and talk to you again soon. Bye.